let's change gears for a second. Let's talk about the transition from your father-in-law to you. So when the hats came, his hat of CEO running the company came off, he was a pretty unique individual. I mean, based on what you've said already, he made all the decisions. He was that strong D, that A-type personality. He was I'm gonna give you some words that I heard from another client. Tell me if this resonates. He was a benevolent dictator, got things done, knew how to get it done. How did he make the transition to you, and what was that process like? If you don't mind sharing that.
Sure. And I'll tell you also, he still comes to work every day.
Okay, wonderful.
Yeah, he's still there. So when my son is in the office, we've got 3 generations there working together, and it's fantastic.
I love it.
Yeah, and he loves it. I know he loves seeing his grandson there every day. But I think it was more of it was just a natural thing, right?
Okay.
There are still things that he needs to be involved in, which I totally respect and understand, and he likes to make those decisions. But there are certain things that he's not comfortable doing. He doesn't love the personnel stuff, right? So I handle that. A lot of the customer relationship things that need to get done, I might handle, but we do have obviously a staff below me. But I think it kind of just happened naturally. I was one of 3 other key people below him for a long period of time. It was myself. It was the guy I told you who was my mentor, who was our VP of operations. And then there was our general manager and vice president of sales. And then our CFO.
Okay.
And that was our leadership team. And then so 2 gentlemen retired, our VP of operations and our general manager and director of sales. So they retired, and then we never really replaced them. So those other functions kind of all just came to me.
Okay.
Right. So I think as that happened, he started, leaning back a little bit and saying, okay, I can trust that all this is going to get done. And I team up with the CFO. Our plant manager has risen up and assumed more responsibilities. And I have a director of sales now. So I didn't have to be the one leading the sales group. I did that for a long time. I love it. I'm very passionate about it because I know I'm good at it, but I needed somebody else to be able to do the day-to-day managing. It's not reasonable for me to do that because I've got to grow the business, and I have to pay attention to the other different managers within the company.
Right. So that's the responsibility side of it. And feel free to say, I don't want to talk about this, but did ownership, of the actual shares of the, ownership of the company, did that transition, or is he still the owner?
It's family, but not through me.
Okay. Got it. So and this is interesting. And I hope, again, feel free to say that's too personal. A lot of families have a situation. So he's taking ownership shares and they're going to his daughters, I'm going to assume. And you're still running the business, and your son is coming up behind you, So when the business, has there been conversations with the 2 sisters to talk about, look at, here's how things move forward.
Yes.
Over the, when dad passes, this is what it's going to look like. How are those conversations, and how have you, maneuvered your way through those?
That's a good question. So certainly that is a recent phenomenon and discussion. It's very timely. They've just recently started having these conversations. and planning for the future. And I think a lot of this came because of this new business that we have. And as I was working with our attorneys, our accountants, and everything else, I was pretty much doing most of it myself, and then
Yep.
reporting to my father-in-law what was going on during all the due diligence. A lot of this came up during during these conversations, and how are we going to do this, and how are we going to do that? And I said, okay. I said to my wife, I said, hey, look, you and your sister and your mom and your dad, you guys all need to get together and talk about the future.
Right.
And one of the jokes we used to have at the company was after my son was born, and we used to send holiday cards out to people at the end of the year. Some of them who I used to send them to in the office, they would say to me, oh, there's the future president of the company. He was 2 years old.
Right. Right.
And by the way, that's not being sexist or anything related to my daughter, because I do have, my daughter's older than my son, but
Okay.
she's an attorney and she has no desire
Yeah.
to ever.
And I'm sure, I'm sure that if she had a desire, you would have said, come on in. It would
Absolutely.
Right. 100%.
Absolutely.
Those conversations, I can't, for those people listening, I kind of felt that this was just happening based on how you were speaking about it. And that's not what we're here to discuss, but it's just so important to get them on the table. And what I would throw to you is the what if questions are some of the most powerful questions that you can talk about now and record them on paper. What if sales decline? What if we go into a recession? What if, something happens to mom before dad? What if it happens? What if thing happens to the sister, that's not working in the business before her other sister? And putting all of those what ifs on the table right now. I have a family they're not a client. It's a long story, but family friends, and they are now in year 6 of probate court because they, in this circumstance, they named, legal counsel and the accounting the accounting firm as the executor of their estate, and dad never talked to anybody about the wishes and what ifs. And money has the strange impact on people when things don't go the way that they had a story. Everybody has a story in their head. Human beings have this crazy ability to create a story. And if we don't know the end of the story before we get there, we create it. That's why the, soap operas and, all of the movies, when they have the cliffhanger, that there's an episode 2 coming, they want to hook us because we want to hear the end of that story.
Yeah, I would say to you that I've heard those horror stories over the years from friends who have gone through this with their families and family businesses, and it is really bad, and it ruins families.
Yeah.
And I know personally 2 or 3 of those situations, and I believe that what we've been doing is preparing for that in a very positive way. Yeah, it took a little longer than maybe we wanted to for the conversation to start, but it happened, and I think we're in a much better place than others that I know that have not been as fortunate to be prepared as you indicate, and as you've indicated, because you've seen it so many times. It's just awful. You never want that to happen. You don't want things to come between close family members.
Yeah.
And I've seen it in families where there's an abundance of money available to everybody. but yet they still want more than what the other person has. And it's crazy.
Yeah. And I have another one right now where it was not in a million years when my first 5 years of dealing with them as a client, would I have ever suspected what I'm dealing with today. And so money, and it doesn't have to be tons of money.
Right.
Sometimes, I have stories that, the one I always use is, grandpa's wood nickel, Johnny thought he was getting it and Susie thought she was getting it. And now they don't talk because, he cut it in half and, said, here, fine, we'll split it. And, and so, again, there are horror stories, but what you're doing, communication and establishing trust and establishing, going through the what ifs, that's the inoculation against that.